6.5 million people are menopausal in the UK, and 900,000 of them have left their job due to lack of support from their companies. Supporting those who experience the menopause is not just a tick box exercise. Retirement age for women is currently sitting at 64, and the average age for women hitting menopause is 51. So women will go through menopause at the workplace. It's a fact. But why are we not talking about it enough? And why are there not many policies in place to help women through this part of their life? Hayley White, founder of Menospace, has a background in psychology and mental health training at work. And after experiencing perimenopause at the young age of 41 and realising the serious lack of information and support for women on this, she set up Menospace, a company that offers training to organisations on how to create policies, reasonable adjustments and awareness in the businesses on what so many of us experience in our lifetime. Having worked with companies such as the BBC, NHS and Colt, the menopause is not just an issue for women. It's for organisations, leaders, team managers, co-workers, and all who are contributing to the culture of the workplace. I can't wait for you to listen to this episode. Let's get into it. Hi guys, welcome to the next episode of Sales Unfiltered. Today I am really looking forward to this conversation because I am joined by Hayley White, the founder of Menospace, to be discussing something that we haven't discussed on this channel yet, but with myself being really passionate about supporting women in the workplace, I'm ashamed that we haven't discussed this. And I think it's something that actually businesses and people don't talk about enough, and that is how we can support women going through the menopause in the workplace. We recently created a Making Movements Insights Pack for our community of women in tech sales, and we asked all of our respondents if they knew anything about their family planning package before starting their company. And we had an overwhelming response that 64% of people had no clue what their package was. But I'm assuming the majority of that response was down to their maternity package and people not necessarily thinking about the menopause. So I guess the really great place to start, because a lot of people probably don't talk about this or learn about this enough, is that education piece. So could you describe to us what the menopause is?
Yeah, a good place to start, and thank you for having me here. So the menopause itself is actually just for one day. So we start off in perimenopause, and there's this myth around it only happens to old women or older women. If you Google menopausal women, around 95% of the images that come up will be Caucasian women with grey hair in the mid to late 60s, when it actually couldn't, it's really couldn't be further from the truth.
Yeah.
The average age here in the UK when a woman starts perimenopause is 45. And it isn't unusual for somebody to start perimenopause under the age of 40. Like 1 in 100 women experience it under the age of 40. So we start going to perimenopause, and like I said, in the UK, it's around 45. And I'm saying the UK because, interestingly, depending on where you live in the world, influences when you start your perimenopause. And then we go through perimenopause, which can last between 2 to 10 years. But on average, here in the UK, you look very frightened.
Yeah, that's long. You said it was one day. I was like,
no,
oh,
that's the menopause.
Right, okay.
This is why we need to do this education.
Yeah.
And then, and then the average age to go through perimenopause, the average time that it lasts is 4 to 6 years. So can be 2 years, could be 10 years, but it's on average, it's around 4 to 6 years.
Okay.
And so the official medical definition of having gone through menopause is when you haven't had a menstrual bleed for exactly 12 months, like 12 months and 1 day. So if you had a menstrual bleed after 11 months, then you're not officially in menopause.
Okay.
It has to be the 12 months. And then it's 1 day. And then from the rest of your life, you're considered to be in postmenopause from then. So that's really, I think, is really interesting. And not a lot of women know that.
No.
And
can I just interject there? So is there something, obviously you said it's got to be 12 months and 1 day for you to not have a menstrual cycle. Is there, do you go to the doctors? Are you like, right, this is the moment, I've got because it's obviously something that happens to every female, but it's not a diagnosis, is it? I mean, how?
Well, the most important point, I think, and what I like to get across, and that I think the most important point in all of this is that we're all individuals, and we're all no one person will experience menopause the same. So depending on different things that are happening for you and your circumstances, how healthy you are, your lifestyle factors, if you've got an underlying health condition, a disability, neurodiversity, if you're part of the LGBTQ plus community, all of these things will play a part in how you experience menopause.
Wow.
So back to the question, if you're educated and you around the subject and you have an awareness and you understand and you know that usually the first sign of perimenopause is irregular bleeding, and if you're in your mid-40s and you start having irregular periods and a few other symptoms, common ones which could be hot flushes and night sweats and those kind of things, then you're probably gonna start to realise that you're going through perimenopause. So the vast majority of women, I would say, don't go to the GP and to the doctor because unless they're starting to get debilitating symptoms and feel like they need help. And then it is at that point when a lot of them will be offered something like HRT. And then it's up to the individual whether they want to take HRT. So it's really quite complex, and it's quite complex.
And for listeners that might never have spoken about this topic or have anybody in their lives that have been through perimenopause or the menopause, you mentioned HRT. Can you just explain a little bit about what that is?
Yeah, so it's hormone replacement therapy. And what it does is so the reason why we experience all of these symptoms when we're going through perimenopause is because of our hormone levels start to change. And it's all of our hormones. It's estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, cortisol, a lot of all of our hormones. However, the main two that fluctuate are progesterone and estrogen. So what HRT does is helps to replace and level out those hormones that are lost or that are
imbalanced.
Yeah. Thank you. I've got a bit of brain fog, I think.
That's okay. I have brain fog most days, so we'll help each other.
It's usually after 3 p.m. and it is after 3 p.m.
I'm sorry to book this interview after 3 p.m. How rude of me. So Hayley, you and your background, I mean, we've mentioned this in the introduction, but I think it would be really great for us to hear a little bit about that experience of you going through perimenopause, because you went through it at 41, and that's really where you started getting involved with Menospace and working in this area to support businesses and raise that awareness, because I was shocked to hear that. I thought that you went through your menopause when you're in your late 50s, 60s, and actually hearing that people do go through it at an earlier stage and it can last 10 years. It's something that I will hold my hands up to and I don't know enough about. And I think it's, yes, maybe something that I might not be going through for the next 10, 20 years, but I say 20 years, I'm 30 now, let's be real, it's probably the next 10 years or so. But I think it's something that's really important for us to actually be aware of at that younger demographic. So what was that experience like for you to go through something like the perimenopause, and what triggered you to thinking, right, I really want to now start helping people to make a difference?
Yeah, so as you said, I was 41, and it was in 2021. So it was when we were still in the midst of COVID and lockdown, etc. And my background is in mental health and well-being, and I have been working with organisations delivering mental health training, well-being at work training for a number of years. And obviously when COVID came along, then I lost all of that work. So like most people, I was experiencing anxiety and feeling stressed and having bouts of depression, like a lot of us were back then. But as well, on top of that, my periods were really irregular. I was having heavy bleeding, which was concerning because it was every couple of weeks and I'd always been really regular. And like I said, that's usually one of the first signs, but I didn't know anything about any of this back then. But the other symptoms I was getting was things like brain fog, walking into a room and forgetting why I'd gone in there, and waking up during the night sweating and things like that. But of course, I never in a million years I thought that it would have anything to do with menopause. And my GP was quite concerned about the bleeding. And so he referred me to a gynecologist, and they did numerous tests, and, it turned out to be fine. But the last appointment that I had, the gynecologist told me that I was in perimenopause. So I could say that I was kind of lucky in that respect, because I was actually formally told, where a lot of women aren't. And a lot of women are struggling, if they are younger, to be taken seriously by a lot of medical practitioners, to be honest with you. Once I'd left the hospital, after the gynecologist told me that I was perimenopausal, he actually said, "You're perimenopausal, so go to your GP and get some HRT." And that was it. So I walked out of there thinking, what's perimenopause? How can you be talking to me about menopause when I'm only 41?
Yeah.
And
go pick up HRT as if you're going to Boots to just pick up some new deodorant.
Exactly. I didn't even know what HRT was, because my mum hadn't taken it, and she barely mentioned the menopause to me. So I'm not blaming her, but she had a few hot flashes, and that was about it, I think.
Lucky.
I know, exactly.
Bit bitter?
Slightly. So I went home and I started to do my own research, and that's, I started to do my own research from a personal perspective. But the more digging I did, the more I uncovered how much of an issue it is within the workplace.
Yeah.
And back then, CIPD and Bupa had done some research in 2020 that found that over 900,000 women had left the workplace because they weren't getting the support that they needed, which is now over 1 million. But being from the background that I was from and finding this out, I was even more shocked, because I couldn't believe that I'd worked in the wellbeing and mental health at workspace, and this had never even came up. So then that set me up, really fired me up to want to do something to help women at work.
Yeah. It's so shocking, because I do a lot of talks with people about what happens after people go off for their maternity leave, and actually businesses lose a huge amount of their employees after they've been on their maternity leave, because they're not supporting women on returning to work and really embedding them back into that culture and allowing them that flexibility to be a working mother, successful in their job as well. But it's not really something that you hear about. That 900,000 people that they're losing from the menopause and the lack of support is shocking. Why do you think the businesses, because they do talk a lot about, when it's attracting and retaining female talent, it's create a comprehensive maternity package, look after the women that are going to start families, but they don't really ever talk too much. And I know it's with the Equality Rights Act, it is improving, which is great to see, but not many businesses are speaking about menopause. Why is that?
A lot more are now. Around 25% of organisations in the UK have got menopause policies now, which is a big increase. But I think one of the main reasons is because of the rise in retirement age. Perimenopausal and postmenopausal women are the biggest demographic in the workplace now.
Wow.
Because women are working until they're a lot older. For financial reasons, and also because they want to as well. So I think that's playing probably the biggest part in that.
Yeah.
And organisations are realising that, it's not something that they can brush under the carpet anymore, that it's something that we need to start talking about, just like menstrual health and just like mental health and well-being a few years ago.
Yeah, it's really interesting you say that about the demographic going up. I went to a really interesting event recently about ageism in the workplace and how we should be actually looking to support the older generation in the workplace, because I think there was a statistic that one of the speakers said that 50% of babies born today will live up to 103, which is wild. And at the moment, I think the average age of retirement for women is 64, but that will increase.
It is. It's already
to
going to
70
increase
within the next 10 years. So if you think about, right, well, if you're starting perimenopause between the ages of 40 to 50, as you mentioned, it is a fact that women in your workplace will go through menopause or perimenopause whilst they are working with you.
Yeah.
So we have to be addressing this.
Exactly. Precisely.
So when we talk about this, what would you say, I guess before we get into unpacking what businesses can do to support it, would be the biggest misconceptions about the menopause?
The age thing. for sure. I mean, and just the general definitions of it, you know, if women don't know about this stuff, how can we expect men to? How can we expect male line managers to know? We can't. So it's, you know, there's a real lack of education. And then in terms of other misconceptions, you know, there's this fallacy that, oh, well, it'll be a few hot flushes and a bit of brain fog for all women, and then they can just get on with it, that kind of thing. But one of the biggest points I like to get across is that we're all different, and how we experience it. Like I said earlier, there's all these different factors. There's ethnicity, there's cultural factors, there's socio-economic factors, so many different things, all these different, you know, we all have more than one identity. So we're all experiencing it differently. So it's like, I'd love everybody to realise that we can't take a blanket approach to this, and that we have to do it from an individual level and take it seriously.
So when we speak about that and saying you can't take a blanket approach, as a business listening to this, they might go, well, that's really difficult, Hayley, because if we're writing a policy, we do need to write a policy. And although I'm sure companies would love to say, right, we'll give you this, right, and then this woman that's experiencing just a hot flush once, like your mum, they don't need as much support in this area. So like, what would be those steps initially when you are creating policies to support women with the menopause?
Well, the policy is just a small part of it, you see. The policy would be a generic kind of processes piece. And then we would need to, first of all, everybody needs to have an awareness. So the basic understanding of like the things that we've just spoken about today. And then what I would like to see is all line managers have training around menopause. And then what we do within that training is show line managers how to carry out individual risk assessments. So then they can and how to have sensitive conversations around menopause, so that the conversation's happening on an individual level, and then the person who's affected by menopause is feeding into what support it is that they need, and that's how it works. That would be how it works.
Yeah. So you don't think that there's necessarily, well, I guess would you say it's like a trial and error of you start with, okay, we would give this support, and then if that's something that the women in your workplace feel it's not supportive enough, then you change it, and it's all about being adaptable?
Yeah, totally. But what might work for one woman might not work for another one. And there's over 60 symptoms of menopause. So what one person could be struggling with hot flashes, for example. Some women get around 10 per hour, where another woman could be struggling with tingling sensations or burning tongue, or there's so many different symptoms. And like I said, depending on other things that are happening, that has an impact on how you'll experience it as well. So it has to be individualised.
Yeah. What is 60 symptoms? That is mad.
Yeah.
What is like, I guess, because hot flashes is the one that most people think that you go through. What would you say are some of the more unknown? I've never heard of like the tingling tongue, but maybe can you give us a little bit of an insight? I thought that was just when I drink a hot tea. I'm like, oh.
No. Another common one, which is awful, is hair loss. Yeah, hair loss. Some women lose their teeth.
Really?
Yeah, it can cause severe gum disease. Electric shocks. Some women get electric shocks. A change in body odour. It can cause you to be more susceptible to hay fever. So lots of different things that you probably wouldn't link.
Yeah. So because I always find this really interesting when you talk about education and research, when you're discussing something like this and women's health, I think, well, personally, I'd be interested to hear what your thoughts are, but the onus is on the employee to educate themselves about what's happening with their employees and how they can best support. But I do also think that part of that onus is on the female themselves and to make sure that they are well read on what they're maybe going through, because as you said, it's very individual, and you can't expect your employer to know that you are experiencing like tingling of your tongue, and
Yeah.
that actually maybe if they're in a meeting and they need to take a bit of a breather because they're going through something like that, the employer can't be the be all end all of knowledge.
Yeah.
So what is that balance when you are talking about something like this? Do you suggest that if you've got somebody that's going through the menopause to sit down with their line manager and go, here are the symptoms that I'm struggling with at the moment, listing that out, and kind of having that two-way conversation instead of waiting for their manager to come them going, right, I'm going to give you a desk fan, and they're like, well, I haven't had a hot flush. So.
Yeah, exactly. Precisely, that is
Yeah.
it. You know, we should be hopefully we should have cultures where a person feels comfortable enough to go up to their line manager and say, this is what I'm experiencing, this is how I would like you to support me.
Yeah.
And if we've got that kind of supportive culture, then it shouldn't be too difficult. But as you say, it is kind of a 360 approach. It's something that we all need to be aware of, and something that women do need to start thinking about. I mean, that's why I'm here today, to get it out there to younger women. I mean, we mentioned HRT, but there's so much we can be doing in terms of our lifestyle factors, and like putting things in place now so that when the perimenopause does happen, you're the fittest that you can be. You're eating well. You know, you're educated around it, so you know how to manage it to the best of your ability.
What are some of those things that we can do now, aside from eating well and being fit and healthy?
Which you all look like you are in here. Knowing how to manage stress, that's a big one. Because stress does exacerbate menopausal symptoms. Sleep, having a sleep routine. But of course, our bodies change as we get older. We could all live on 4 to 5 hours sleep when we were in our 20s and early 30s.
Oh no, I need like 9 hours. I'm
Do
a
you?
baby.
So you're doing well. You're doing well then.
No, I'm scared though. When I get older, I'm gonna be like, I'm just asleep all the time.
Another thing to point out is that women are more at risk and prone to osteoporosis, so brittle bones. So if we can be doing strength building exercises all our adult life, that's absolutely fantastic, you know. And it doesn't only have to be like weightlifting. Not all women want to do that. It could be Pilates, yoga, lots of different things.
Yeah.
Some of my friends do rock climbing. Lots of different things that we can do. So
nice.
It's having this awareness and knowing that your body will start to change as well, and kind of keeping a check on it and a track on it, rather than it just creeping up on you and being there one day like it did with me.
Yeah, definitely. Do you think that businesses are set up and the workplace is set up for men's health?
This is an interesting one. There's a lot of talk about this, and I think previously historically it was, but I think that is starting to change. Like the most organisations that I go into now, for example, they have sanitary products in the toilets, which I always think is fantastic.
Have you been to the toilet here?
Yes, and you have them here, I noticed straight away.
It's so funny with the people that come to our events and stuff. They're like, I love that you have tampons.
Yes.
And I'm like, great, we've got a rainforest and you like the tampons.
Yeah, exactly.
But hey, each their own.
So things are starting to change, because I think the workplace originally was designed with men in mind, like ergonomically and things like that. The way desks are set up and heights and sizes of things. But, that was when we had standardized desk furniture and standardized offices. I mean, look at this office. It's like, well, I don't know what it's like, but it's really cool. And you've got all different sized desks and chairs and rooms and areas. And I think we're doing well with that.
I'd love to know from you, Hayley, from somebody that's been through this, just to give our listeners a bit of a lens into what it's like to experience that in the workplace. Could you maybe, obviously we've talked through some of the symptoms today, but how that really affects your working and how you navigate being in full-time employment whilst going through something like this, because it must be really, really difficult if you have severe symptoms that some women might be sitting here listening thinking, God, if I go through all of those 60 symptoms, there is no way that I can have a career whilst going through the menopause. So if you can maybe give us some experiences that you've been through or you've heard from the work that you've done.
Yeah, sure. But I just want to say, I don't think anybody experiences all of the symptoms.
That would be horrible.
Yeah, and you wouldn't experience them all at once. And the symptoms do fluctuate as well. So if you experience one set of symptoms, it doesn't mean it's going to last for those 4 to 6 years.
Yeah.
They fluctuate. And also, just as well, just so people aren't scared, around 25% of us will experience virtually no symptoms. 50% will experience moderate symptoms, so they might have a little bit of an impact on our day-to-day life and our working life, and we have to find ways of managing them. And then around 25%, unfortunately, will experience debilitating symptoms. And those are often, women report to me that things, there's a lot of women that say to me, I've been doing my job for 20 odd years and suddenly I don't know how to do it anymore. So that's really frightening. Or there'll be female leaders who are presenting to the boardroom and suddenly they're forgetting what they're saying, or they're sweating when they're presenting and coming out in hot flushes and things like that. And then the anxiety as well around just doing your day-to-day life can be crippling for some women as well. And I think, again, everybody's different and we need to look at it from an individual level, but it's having the awareness, being educated around it and being open, talking to people. Don't keep it to yourself. That's the worst thing that you can do. You really do need to talk to your peers, to a colleague that you trust. It might not be your line manager, but it could be, just somebody that you're friendly with, that you, like I say, like you trust. And also let your family members know, let your partner know, let your children know, let your siblings know. So being really open about it and asking for support, that's what you need to do. And also keeping a journal, keeping a diary. Like I said, you will start to change. Like, for example, the foods that you eat might start to affect you differently.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you might have an intolerance to certain foods that you can't eat anymore. Or drinking coffee suddenly might bring on hot flushes, or alcohol. A lot of women find that their tolerance to alcohol lowers a lot.
Oh,
yeah,
I love wine.
Me too.
And coffee.
Me too. But I was noticing that I was getting some hot flushes from coffee over a certain amount of time, but that's stopped now. So don't think, oh gosh, this symptom's here forever. And the same for employers as well. If somebody is going through insomnia, for example, and waking up with night sweats, and what we hear is this time of the night during the hours of 3 a.m. and 4 a.m. where women are waking up and they're really struggling to get back to sleep. They might have to be up at 6 o'clock and they can't get back to sleep, and there's this perpetual cycle, and then they're worried about going to bed because they know that this is going to happen. It's really, really tough. And then, of course, that has an effect on your memory and on your anxiety and your stress levels. So what we'd expect or hope is that that person could go to the employer and say, this is happening. And luckily, if it's an organisation that has flexible working, that would be something that could be looked at, shift patterns rearranged, and that might only need to happen for 1 or 2 months for the person to start to feel settled and get back into a routine again. So none of this has to be forever, and small things can really have a big impact.
I love that. And I really like the point of you keeping a journal. Like, people keep period journals to understand their cycles. So if you're going through something like such a huge body change, it is really important for you to understand, right, what is sticking and what's changing. So that you can wrap your head around it and then help other people to understand what you're going through. And then, Hayley, I wanted to discuss as the last point today of this conversation is that that education piece, the research, talking about it, how you educate your workplace. And we've said it's really important for both the women and the employee to be educated about it. You go through your organization and do these training sessions with teams. Where would you suggest that people, aside from working, and I'm sure a lot of people will be searching you after this episode and reaching out for those sessions, but where can people go to level up their knowledge? And also, what would you suggest in terms of like who needs to be learning about this? Is it just that C-suite, or should it be everybody is having that open discussion so that it doesn't become a taboo in the office and you don't have to feel like how women feel running to the toilet with their tampon in their like pocket and being a bit embarrassed? That it doesn't have to be something that actually with your peer that's maybe the same level as you don't have to feel embarrassed to talk about it to them.
Yeah. Great. So in terms of resources, I highly recommend all organisations get hold of the BSI, which is the British Standards Institute set of guidelines that came out last year, and therefore menstrual health, menstruation and menopause. They're really comprehensive and give lots of different advice and information and advice and information around all of the subjects within the workplace. So I would start there. And then from a practical level, the CIPD have got some amazing free resources that any organisation can use.
Nice.
As well as my websites, of course.
Shameless plug.
And then, but then beyond that, I would have a consultation with somebody like myself, a discussion, because as well, organisations tend to be at different places with all of this. Mm-hmm. Some might have a policy and then they've just got a policy and they don't know what to do about it or with it. Others might not have done anything. Some might have just had the odd awareness session on awareness days. So you would start with having a chat with somebody like myself to kind of scope out where your organisation is and what your demographics are and what's already in place and those kind of things. And then as a minimum, I would recommend awareness sessions for all staff because everybody needs to know about it and have an awareness about it. And then line manager training. And for example, with my line manager training, I make it bespoke for each organisation. So it will be bespoke to the organisation depending on what other things an organisation has in place. A menopause policy, and getting some menopause champions in place. Because menopause champions are brilliant. They're advocates. They tend to be people who've been through the menopause themselves or are going through the menopause. And people often feel a lot more confident going and having a chat with them than they would a line manager or HR. And a lot of the time, women who have gone through this, they just want to feel heard and they just want somebody to talk to. And menopause champions can just be there as a support and point them in the right direction and give them some resources and just check on them and make sure that they're okay. So, and that's a lot of the time what people want.
I love that. We talk about male allies, but menopause champions is great. Well, Hayley, thank you so much for being on the channel today. I think you've shared so much of your wealth of knowledge and advice on hopefully what businesses can take and really implement into their companies on creating that inclusive place for women going through the menopause. But as we finish every episode here on Sales Unfiltered, what is one challenge that you faced in your life or your career that's really shaped you to where you are today?
I would have to say, in my last corporate role, I was bullied, and that has led me to being self-employed, to running my own business. And I would say, that is definitely up there with one of the most,
Wow.
So I had to, I left the organisation because I was being bullied and it went quite high up. And so I can't really talk too much about it because of legal aspects.
Of course.
But it's just, it's funny how things turn out because at the time it was devastating and I didn't know where I was going to go from there. And it really destroyed my confidence and but then it set me on this trajectory of being self-employed, of launching my own company. And so it's about overcoming adversity, I guess. And might have still been there and none of this would have happened. And this is probably this is the best thing I've done from a career point of view, by far. So,
that's so nice that you could take something positive from that, because I'm sure you felt so isolated when you were going through that.
I did, but I used some of the. I was financially compensated, shall we say, and I used some of that. I used some of that to retrain.
Amazing.
So it's kind of So.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah,
Hayley, we have a lot of conversations with people on speaking up, having the conversation, having the confidence to understand your worth, to feel heard and supported. And I'm really grateful that you are being so open and honest with sharing that, because I think a lot of people that maybe are listening or watching this might feel like they're going through the same thing. So you were so brave to be able to go, do you know what? I deserve better in my life, and take a step back. So I'm so proud of you for doing that. But what advice would you give to maybe other people that are going through that are feeling so isolated at the moment, thinking, where do I turn? Maybe actually going down a route of being self-employed. Will I feel actually not supported because I'm going to be alone? And obviously it's been so empowering and amazing, incredible for you. But for that pivotal moment, what would you tell the people?
Well, I feel grateful that there was a union within that organisation. They supported me so much. And I also turned to my colleagues as well. So even if there hadn't been a union, I would have wanted the support of some of my colleagues. So I hope that anybody that's listening who's going through this and experiencing this has somebody there in their corner that they can go and speak to. They feel like we'll support them and listen to them. And to be honest, if they're not being taken seriously by the organisation, then I would advise them to leave, because no job is worth your mental health.
Get that on a t-shirt.
Yeah.
Well said. Hayley.
I bet you that hasn't happened before.
That really was a mic drop. That's so good. I actually don't want to cut that out. Really? A bag just fell off one of the crates. That is hilarious. Oh my gosh. Well, Hayley, thank you so much for being on the channel today, for being so honest, open, vulnerable, and sharing your advice with everybody. It's been incredible to have this conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. I've loved it.
Thanks so much for listening. Check out the channel for more episodes like this one, and we'll see you next week.